Principal Matters Podcast, episode 385. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. This week, we're going to talk about capturing kids' hearts with my special guest, the renowned Flippen. Flippen is a New York Times bestselling author, social entrepreneur, psychotherapist, and the founder and chairman of Capturing Kids' Hearts, one of the largest educator training and team development companies in North America. Flipp and his wife, Susan, were named Ernst Young Entrepreneurs of the Year, making them the first couple to ever receive this prestigious award. Their company was chosen by Texas Monthly Magazine as the #2 best companies to work for in Texas. Flipp and his team are passionate about bringing out the best in people. Flippen, welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Before we jump into the questions, I like to ask my guests to fill in the gaps on that intro. And why don't you tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Well, first, Will, thanks for having me. It's just a privilege on our part to get to be on your podcast. So thank you for that. I think the other thing that is probably more important than anything to people is that Susan and I have helped raise in one form or another 20 kids, and so we have a huge family, and we love children. We've just our whole lives have been about kids, and so that's probably the greatest legacy I'll ever leave will be in my family, and I'm grateful for that.
That's a good legacy. Well, you and I were talking off the air, and I was setting the stage for this conversation. And I'll do the same thing for our listeners, just so that they know. I started teaching in 1993, Flipp, and I remember coming across your content back in the 90s. And then later in my leadership development, I came across some of the coaching work that you've done. And because of the growth of my podcast, I started becoming friends with your team members. And so I was joking with you that this is the longest it's taken me to get a guest on my show. So Flippen, I am so excited to have you in the room, and I'm going to try to squeeze every moment here. So I'm just going to dive straight into some questions that I've been dying to ask you for a long time. The first is, let's talk about why you are motivated by educators. So who was one of your best teachers and coaches, and why? What kind of influences have teachers made in your life?
Well, let's go back and start real quick. So a quick overview. In first grade, I found out my real name, and my teacher was calling me by my legal name. I'd never heard it before, Will, and I actually broke down crying, and I was, I'll never forget that. I went to the nurse's station in great disarray. Finally was comforted. And so I've been Flipp all my life. In second grade, I had the most phenomenal experience with Ms. Matthews and Ms. Gresham. They, is interesting towards the end of the second grade year for me, they're in a small town in Orange, Texas. She told me, she said, Flipp, there have been 5 boys that the principal's chosen for a leadership program, and you have to get your parents to agree to it and all this kind of stuff. And boy, I was really excited. And so I went home and got my parents to sign this little paper so I could be in this leadership program. And we were going to help first graders get started in second grade. And Will, that was a defining moment for me. Well, I'm 18 years old, and I'm being driven to college by my mother. And she tells me that it's really good that I'm with my age group. And I'm like, what do you mean my age group? And she said, well, when we held you back in second grade. And I was like, Mother, I didn't get held back in second grade. That's my brother or somebody. It wasn't me. I mean, I said, remember I was chosen for that leadership academy and all that? And Will, honest to gosh, she looked at me, she said, did it ever dawn on you that you never went back up with the other group? But Will, here's the beauty of that. I couldn't read. I could not read. And I was never framed as a failure, as a loser, as nothing. I was chosen to be in a leadership program to help other kids get their lives started. And well, as surely as I sit here, I'm telling you that has defined my entire life's work as a psychotherapist, working with gangs, running a nonprofit, all the way up through our corporate services today. I mean, it doesn't make any difference what it is. She defined my life. So second grade was the best 2 years of my life. And sixth grade was wonderful with Hazel Fennell, and I had Miss Kirkendall. I had Miss Kantz. I had some wonderful, wonderful teachers. Cappy Riggs was my coach, and I'll never forget him. Here's the interesting thing is that, I was not close to my parents, and they had a lot of their own struggles and issues. And, I got hugged. I think my mother hugged me when I was 42, and it was nice. It was a little late, but it was nice. And pretty much the same for my dad. But they were good people. They just had their own issues. But when you've got adults in your life that genuinely care about you, they write so deep on your soul, you never get over it. And I never have. I drive a Denali, and I live on my ranch, and I have clothes, and I have a ton of books, and I own my house, and everything in my life, everything, every place I've gone, I owe to my teachers. Mm-hmm. So how in the world could I not be in love with that?
I love those stories, Flip. And you're bringing back my own memories. I think you and I are fellow storytellers. One of the memories that you're bringing back to me was my early years in Northwest Tennessee. We were in a very rural community, and I had such great teachers who cared deeply about me, and my parents were affectionate and supportive too. But it wasn't until my very first year of teaching, when we were passing out forms for free and reduced lunches, that the light bulb came on. And I thought, you know what? I qualified every single year for free and reduced lunches when I was going through school. Wow. But I never knew what Title I was. I didn't know anything about the federal programs involved in that until I was actually back in the school as a teacher. Yeah. And then I had that same reflection you did, which was, wow, whatever my background was, it certainly didn't define my outlook on life in terms of my teachers always treated me like I could do anything. And they instilled that same hope in me. And I think in some ways they protected me from some of the realities that I was facing too. It sounds similar to what you've gone through. I know that the foundational experiences that we have often, and you said this yourself, set us on the trajectory of where we're going to go. That's right. Talk about how that trajectory led you to capturing kids' hearts.
Well, it's a great story. I was finishing up my doctoral work at A&M, and it was fascinating to me. I was going to Kenya to work on a project with Louis Leakey, and I had the opportunity to really work with a bunch of gang kids, and I fell in love with those kids. And of course, I was not that much older, and I just thought, I could really make a difference here. And Dr. Leakey's position was the most prestigious position in the world at that time in my profession, and I'll never forget telling Dr. Kovaleski that I was going to resign that position and open a nonprofit and work with gang kids. And here are the things that I learned is that working with gangs, and I learned more working with gangs than I ever did in school. I'll just tell you that. I learned what works, what doesn't work, et cetera. I didn't know, nobody knew a lot of the neuroscience then that we know now, but the reality is that every time I was in a good relationship with somebody, I was very safe. It didn't matter. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the Mexican mafia and the Nueva Escondida gang and some others that, are pretty violent. And the learning there was just spectacular. But the thing I learned is that, and I wrote this down, if you have a child's heart, you've got his head. And people did not listen to me until they knew I would deliver for them and care for them. And I was in the jail first few times I ever went to a jail. I'd never been to a jail. And there's this guy up there, and he's like, "Hey, will you check on my sister?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do that." And of course, he no more thought I'd do that than a man to man. And next week, I was up there and I said, yeah, she's doing okay. She's got some needs and here's what they are. And here's what we're doing to kind of help her with that. And he's like, dude, did you check on her? Or did you check her out? And I was like, hey, look, I'm married. I'm not checking your girl out. That's not what this is about. And and the next thing you know is he hears from her that I did what I said I was going to do. And just over a matter very quickly of months, I had very trusting relationships with these guys. And I watched drug deals go down. I watched guys shoot up. I saw things. I had a letter from the district judge that pretty much exempted me from being able to be arrested for being in those settings. And I just learned so much. But the whole deal, well, everything about it was that if you have a deep relationship with someone, you can make a difference in their lives. If you don't, and all you show up with is well-intentions and platitudes, they're not going to pay attention to you. They read authenticity better than any group on the planet. Mm-hmm. And so from there, the thing I began to understand is what they needed were skills to be able to walk in the door and make a difference. They could get a job. They could create jobs. They could do things with their lives. They didn't know how to get dressed. They didn't know how to introduce themselves. They didn't know how to interact with the business community. And so we put these programs together to teach these kids business and professional skills. And then we had them mentoring each other on it. And Will, I know people don't think about this, but everything we do operates in a subculture. Like our Black Sons, if it's all the Black guys getting together, they've got a subculture of how they greet each other, and we have a business subculture. There's a school subculture. Everybody's Mr. and Ms. at school. That's not true in the business world. That's a separate subculture. Mm-hmm. Women, when they get together, they greet themselves differently than if they're a group of men there. And so it's all about how do you learn these different rules of the subcultures. And I wanted them to be able to learn the rules that would help get them into a position where they could have more influence and have a job. And that was the foundation of the whole thing.
So Flip, I'm going to stay here because I want to dig deeply into the process, because you understand the heart of what it takes to work with people and how to connect those heart, that trusting, as you would say, that trusting relationship to now permission to teach you skills. And so there's the foundation, and then here's the direction. How did you take that and turn that into the capturing kids' hearts process? Because there's a process now that you've been able to put together that's not just worked for you, it's worked for lots of people. So talk about what is that process that helps kids who've experienced trauma move into successful outcomes?
Well, it actually is pretty cool how it even came about, because we were running this leadership curriculum. I saw patients all day long, every day. And then I hired Lee Basin to work with me. Barbara Knowles had come as my assistant. And we started teaching an after-school model on teaching these skills. Our teen leadership is what we called it. And it was a 10-week program. You had to apply to get in it. We had a very mix in terms of demographics and SES levels in the classes. And they were a screaming success. I mean, those kids went on, did phenomenal. In fact, I just had a call this week from a young man who was 17 in inner city Cincinnati, African-American kid, single mom, phenomenal kid. And I got to spend a lot of time with him. And he went on, spent 15 years in the CIA as a covert operative, and then several years in the FBI, and now heads up a Google hacking force, a global hacking force for Google and cybersecurity. And, that's just one example. Well, I can give you thousands of them, but we've had over 2 million kids go through that. But the bottom line is the governor called here in Texas and said, hey, put this in public schools. And, I'm really, really sharp. And I said, hey, no. I'm not going to do that. And we had a robust discussion about that. And because I was concerned that everything I'd poured my soul into, I didn't want it to get commoditized and reduced to, some simple process. And so the commissioner was very, very helpful. And he said, let's run some pilots. And so we trained 5 teachers, and I think 3 of them got it, and 2 of them thought I was nuts. And then we trained 7, and 5 of them got it, and 2 of them thought I was really nuts. And this past year, and we've trained over 70,000 teachers, Will, in 2-day or more processes in over 10,000 campuses nationwide. Right now, we've got somewhere between 7 and 9 million students going through our stuff every day. That's over 10% of the population, of the entire student population of the nation. And we never dreamed to do this. And it's very humbling. But the one thing, Will, that I learned is that me teaching a 10-week course, 2 hours once a week, I didn't have the depth of relationships that a teacher could build being with that kid every day, day in and day out, crying with them, seeing when their hearts are broken, seeing when they're succeeding, celebrating their wins on the field. And so we've found tens of thousands of teachers that are just phenomenal. And so for me, it's been very humbling and very sobering, because they're able to do so much more than I could ever do. And again, grateful. That's the only word I can think of.
Wow. So take me on a visit, Flip. And I know with, millions of students who've been through these programs and 70,000 plus teachers who've been trained in this curriculum.
This year, Will. That's this year.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but take me on a visit. And I know I'm doing this for both my own curiosity, but also I want listeners to step into a school. Let's just step into a school with you, Flip. And if I was to see educators using the Capturing Kids' Hearts processes in that school, what would I be experiencing? What are some of the things that I would see that you would be like, I can see the fingerprints of this training on what's going on here?
Yeah. Well, that's actually how we identify the National Capturing Kids' Hearts Showcase winners. So let me give you some good examples from a data point of view. We're looking at 5 different metrics. Discipline referrals is the first one. If we can't drop those discipline referrals within 90 days pretty dramatically, we are absolutely shocked. We know something is really wrong. And it could be the leadership, it could be the way the model's implemented, it could be the student population, it could be a lot of things. Nobody's to blame for that. It could be a lot of variables. But we always see a dramatic drop in discipline referrals. And here's why. If I come in and say, hey, Will, here are the rules for how you're going to interview me, and here's how you're going to treat me, and here's how, and I'm telling you all this, everything in you is going to rise up against that and say, who's he to be telling me this? Yeah. Well, we're all that way. If I push on you, you push back. And every place I go, I see a discipline manual. I've never seen a relationship manual. And so the first thing you're going to see is a social contract process where the kids write the rules for their class. They're their rules. It's their class. I want them to learn self-governance. We cannot teach self-governance if they don't learn how to self-govern. And that to me is the biggest loss in America today. And so you're going to see social contract theory because of social contracts being implemented in the classroom. When you walk in the classroom, one of those students, I don't care if it's kindergarten or seniors, is going to get up, greet you while the teacher's teaching and say, Will, would you mind coming and reading over our social contract and seeing if you're okay with that? And you're like, gosh, okay. And then they're going to ask you to sign it. And we see tons of signatures on these from parents and people who've dropped in the class. We expect you to behave in line with the rules that class has set up. So that's one of the first things. The next thing that you're going to see is you're going to see individual academic performance go up and standardized test score performance go up, although standardized tests right now are catching a lot of flack. But the reality is that when kids learn how to self-govern, they have to accept personal responsibility. You're going to see kids greeting you in the hallways. You're going to see people behaving markedly different. You're going to see teacher engagement at an entirely different level. You will see, well, and this is shocking, But you will see, instead of just a teacher greeting the kids at the door of every classroom, you will see kids standing at the door, greeting kids at the door. Welcome to our classroom. I just left a hot huddle that our in-office staff is having right now. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're standing at the door, hugging everybody comes in, greeting everybody's excited, happy to be together. And those are the kind of things, if you create a great culture, you can put a curriculum on top of that'll work. But let me tell you, Will, I don't care how good your curriculum is. You put it on top of a bad culture, it's going to fail.
Yes.
And that's the mistake that we are making right now in education.
Mm-hmm.
We are heavy focused on, we got to get the curriculum right. We got to get all the standards right. We got to get all that right. And well, I'm telling you, you can have the best seeds in the world, but you plow them out on rocks and see how it works for you.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but what does that actually look like? Look no further than IXL, the ultimate online learning and teaching platform for K-12. IXL gives you meaningful insights that drive real progress, and research can prove it. Studies across 45 states show that schools who use IXL outperform other schools on state tests. Educators who use IXL love that they can easily see how their school is performing in real time to make better instructional decisions. And IXL doesn't stop at just data. IXL also brings an entire ecosystem of resources for your teachers with a complete curriculum, personalized learning plans, and so much more. It's no wonder that IXL is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts. Ready to join them? Visit IXL.com/PM to get started. Oh, I love that. Well, I can't help but pause there, Flip. I grew up in West Tennessee, and so I'm a kid that saw a lot of dirt, and my grandparents always had a great garden. And I love that. That's so quotable. But I want to come back to a couple of things that you said. When I walk into a school where you have been helping schools discover how to capture kids' hearts, because you realize that is the fertile ground in which the seeds of learning can be planted. You said some things here that I just have to park for listeners for just a moment and be the teacher, because the outcomes that you're seeing, the reduction in discipline referrals, the increase in academic performance, all of that is the fruit of the culture that exists where students have norms. I'm going to call them norms, social contracts for these are, this is how we do things here. And so there's a set agreement on this is how we do things here. There's also practiced behavior. So because those kids aren't greeting at the doors just because it happened by happenstance, someone is training them to engage each other in a culture that becomes even more welcoming when it's not just educators, but the kids that are doing it. And I'm going to say what you already know, Flip, because you and I both love good teachers and love good classrooms, but a school building or a school campus or whatever you want to call it, I'll even say the whole school community becomes one big classroom. So a good classroom has all of those dynamics that you just described. And what you guys are doing with capturing kids' hearts is you're inviting an entire school community to become that kind of classroom. Let's build that kind of experience for every person here. I want to let me let you respond to that before I ask my next question, because I know your wheels are going too.
It's true. Well, I mean, healthy communities, that is not, schools don't even think that way. They can talk like that. And there are many great leaders who really do think that way too. But the reality is that in classrooms, you compete for your grades. That's what you do. You compete for your grades. The biggest issue in classrooms today is not the academics. We talk about learning loss. Let me tell you something. Our kids can catch up and our teachers can catch them up. The biggest issue is our discipline issues. It's because we have dysfunctional communities inside our school. Part of that, I think a significant part of that is due to government regulation, rules and constraints that are placed on educators. And I could give you lots of indications of that too. But the reality is you create a healthy community. And if you can create that in the classroom, then you walk it down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
You take it down the hall until you've spread it through the entire system. And that changes the entire community outside the school.
So, Flip, as a mentor of leaders, and I'm just going to say that's what you are, because you've done this work for a long time, and you've got kids now that are doing great things, like the student that you mentioned earlier, who's in leadership within the government, leadership within business. But I want to talk to that leader whose job is to lead a school. And if you had an opportunity to sit down for coffee with a principal, for instance, what kind of advice would you give him or her in how to bring out the best in their people?
Yeah, let me tell you, Will, you got to remember, I'm a clinician. Mm-hmm. I've been a practitioner all my life. So you gotta remember, why do people change? Well, I think that there's only one reason people change, only one reason they ever change. And that is they have an emotionally compelling reason to do so. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason. How many people do we know are overweight? And I mean, they know they got to change that. Their doctors told them, their friends have told them, their spouse have told them. It doesn't make any difference. The scales tell them every day. They don't change. They don't change. But if you have an emotionally compelling reason, then the next thing is okay, how do I make that change? So the first thing for me with leaders is what are you truly passionate about as it relates to your role in this school? What are you passionate about? And whatever that passion is, you've got to convey that as purpose to your team. Well, we've got well over 550 people in our company, spread out all over the globe. And right now, I'm getting 3 to 5 resumes personally a day. And there's nothing on our website that says contact us. We have no job openings and we have no career offerings. And people are always like, how do we get in the company? Well, here's the thing, is that we believe people are drawn to purpose. They want to participate in a purpose-filled life. Mm-hmm. And I think it's incumbent on leaders, no matter what their industry is, to take what they're doing and tie that to some significant purpose. And if you can't do that, then basically I've just got a job. Why would I be passionate about that? I mean, we're on fire about what we do. We've got a 4-star on my board. I got 2 3-stars in the company. I got special forces guy. I've got guys that have sold their companies. One guy sold his company for over $300 million and called me and said, Flip, can I have a job? And I was like, oh my Lord, are you kidding? He's like, nope. He said, there's nothing in the world I want to do more than be part of y'all. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, Sean's sitting right here. He's amazing at what he does. But why is he here? Why is he not still doing stuff with Shark Tank and the other top companies in the world? And people want purpose. So the leaders have to put that in front of their people. You cannot sit there and talk about your statistics. You can't talk about your curriculum. You let the subordinates do that. You let the number 2, number 3, number 4 people. The number 1 person should be driving purpose and passion with every breath out of his mouth.
There's so much there, Flip, and I'm just going to let listeners sit on that for a few minutes, because how you communicate that passion to your people is what's going to drive the outcomes in your school. Right. Now, before I lose this opportunity, as a practiced clinician and as somebody who's spent a lot of time looking at brain research and data, what are some other things? What are a couple of things? Because I know you could write a book at this very moment if I ask you this question too broadly. So let me narrow it down. Why don't you share a couple of things that you've discovered in your work with schools and organizations that connects to that kind of to your brain research that you've done and to the data that you've been studying?
Well, here's some amazing things that this stuff just fascinates me. If I could go back, I'd get a PhD in neuroscience right now. But I can't, so I'm sending some of my team to get it. But here's something beautiful. High levels of cortisol, a stress hormone, shrinks our hippocampus. Well, our hippocampus is our short-term memory. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or I don't care where you come from, who you are. High levels of stress shrink your short-term memory. So let's say that we just had an event like COVID and we come back to school, everybody, including the teachers, hippocampus is shrunk. So you have a wonderful lesson. And so you teach that lesson, but the short-term memory doesn't have any hooks to hang it on. So you taught a wonderful lesson and they can't retain it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what we found out 8.5 years ago? Paul Zak at Claremont University and several other neuroscientists, a buddy of mine down running the Legacy Project in Houston doing fMRIs, we found out you can regrow the hippocampus. There are only three parts of your body: your liver, your skin, and your hippocampus, that to date we know can be regrown. And so if I can regrow my short-term memory, if I can plump that organ up, the question is, how do we do that? Guess what we found? Lower levels of cortisol, higher levels of oxytocin and dopamine. And so how do we do that? Guess what that is? It is touching people. It is affirming people. It is nodding. I mean, Will, I'm talking, you're nodding. I'm talking, you're smiling. You're talking, I'm smiling. That is feeding me neurochemically. And so I know, right? I mean, I'm a really happy camper sitting here with you. And the reason for that is because we're having this interpersonal engagement that actually is impacting me neurochemically. Now let me tell you how unavoidable this is. If I walk up behind you and you're keyboarding, okay, your error rate is going to go up about 30% within less than 10 seconds. That's a fairly universal phenomenon. Why is that? It's because your amygdala, your freeze, flight, or fight response kicks in. Well, how about if I walk up behind you, knowing your error rate is going to go up? If it's a test, a question, I call on you. Will, God bless you, child. What's the answer to X, Y, Z? And you totally smooth freak out. I should expect that. And I should be able to say, okay, guys, come on, let's help him. Who's got the answer? Come on. Where we can play with that and lower those stress levels and get it where you're comfortable, even taking a shot. I want you to be okay making mistakes. I want you to be safe. I'm not going to measure you on did you get it right. I'm going to measure you on how you are growing and developing, knowing that you will get it right. And so we know that we can regrow the hippocampus. So if that's true, then man, we need to get after it as quickly as we possibly can. And that's what we do. That's one of the ways we interweave all of that.
Isn't it wonderful to take what science is explaining about the physiological things that are happening in our bodies, and it's just impossible not to be a teacher and to think, okay, how is this working in a classroom, or how is this working with people? Because you just said such two powerful things there, Flip, and I don't need to repeat this verbatim for listeners, but it's just helpful for me to think out loud. But when we can regrow short-term memory by placing people in situations where touching and affirmation and safety gives them the space to grow, then we're going to see that stress level lower, and suddenly we're going to see understanding improve. And the same thing applies, as you just said, to lowering that flight fight response.
Yep.
Which gives people permission to learn, take risks, maybe even make mistakes, knowing it's going to be okay.
Yep.
And that's the kind of nurturing environment where we want to grow, which is why your company is an attractive place that people want to work, but it's also the kinds of places that we want our schools to be for people to learn as well.
That's what you're doing at home,
yeah.
Will.
Yes, it is.
I mean, think about it. People don't intentionally do their home life. We do. I mean, we are very intentional about it. You can't walk in our door without us hugging you. Mm-hmm. And I don't care if you're from New York or London or Dubai, or it's immaterial to us. We're going to welcome you into our home. We have a group of Muslims and people from India, primarily, a Hindu country, coming for Thanksgiving. We are going to have the most wonderful time. And they're all excited about it. But I want to engage them very intentionally. I want to ask lots of questions about them. I want them to get comfortable telling their stories. And so if we intentionally had a process for this, it makes it all happen. It's really quite beautiful.
I think I could continue this conversation for days, Flippen, but I'm going to respect your time. And I want to just wrap up with two things. One, there's people listening right now that are like, how in the world can I get Flip or his team in my building? How can I connect with you? So I want you to be able to tell people how to connect. But then as we wrap up, I also want you just to share a parting word of advice for a leader who's thinking right now hard about, like, how do I continue to create this kind of environment for my school?
Well, so I think to answer that question, well, I have a question for leaders. So keep in mind, our corporate services team, we work heavy in private equity, oil and gas, energy, finance, all across the globe. Okay. So I can sit in New York with Tony Tritrone at Neuberger Berman, managing $380 billion, and say, Tony, I just want to know, do you love your team? I mean, do you love your team, or are they just production commodities that you dispense with if they don't produce? Do you love your team? And the first time I asked that, it was very awkward for him. If you called him today, he would say unashamedly, openly, I do. And so I think the very first thing is, do you love the team right around you? Do you love your people? Do you love what you're doing? Do you love your purpose? And my wife says all the time, love never fails. And right now we're in such a divided, politicized world. Will, I got BOM friends and CRT friends and people on the far right and people on the far left. And I got nuts on both sides and all that kind of stuff. And, I don't have to agree with everybody. I mean, all this stuff on LGBT and on and on and on. I don't have to agree with everybody. I don't even agree with everything I do. Why the heck would I have to agree with everything somebody else does? That does not keep me from loving them and treating them with great dignity and care and warmth. I'm just not going to live any other way than that. And I've never had anybody say to me, hey, Flip, you just care for me too much. You pull for me too much. You root for me too much. You support me too much. I don't hear people whining about that. And so that's where we pitched our tent, and that's where we're going to stay.
Well, it has been such an amazing honor to stay connected, to meet you finally virtually. I feel like I've known you before because I followed your work for quite a while now. But Principal Matters listeners, as we wrap up today, and I like to say it this way, Flip, give yourself permission to love your schools. Give yourself permission to love your schools. Every leader has such an important role that requires courage and determination and organizational structure, all those skills that are so important for the work that you're doing. But man, when it's embedded in the passion and the love and the care that you show to other people, then you've got a place to land when it gets really hard. And so Flippen, thank you for your wisdom, for the work you've done. Thank you for the influence that you've had in schools and in this world. And on behalf of Principal Matters listeners, I just want to thank you for doing what matters. And Principal Matters listeners, I want to thank you for listening in. And if you'll check out our show notes, there will be links there so that you can connect with the work that Flippen does in capturing kids' hearts. Until next time, thanks for doing what matters, and we'll see you next week. You'll find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations from my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.